Well, hey now. So I've got my good friend Rick here, who's been on the channel a few times, and we've had some good conversations. Rick, how are you?
Doing well, Brian. Thanks for having me on again.
My pleasure. So it's kind of unique. We heard when we both heard that Pink Floyd's Live at Pompeii was being reissued. We both thought, let's watch it and let's do a conversation about it. And lo and behold, I ended up coming to Toronto to see family and friends, and you're in Vancouver, and so we did watch it, both of us, on IMAX on, I guess, the sort of premiere night, as it were, right?
Right, Thursday.
Yeah. So my schedule got busy, but wanted to do a quick review before taking in much more other content. I will confess that I read a Guardian review. I don't know if you read any reviews before.
I have not. I'm still involved in the Twitterverse somewhat, and so there was some stuff there, but it was generally um, not particularly any real reviews or anything, and more just stuff directly either from I think the band or the label, some of that stuff. So I've tried to kind of just keep my own perspective on it at this point as well.
I just couldn't resist. I thought that was the right way to go, but I couldn't stop
Yeah,
myself. Yeah.
yeah.
So I'll paint the picture of who I was with and when I went. So we went to the 7 o'clock showing here in Toronto. I made it a gift to my two brothers. I'm the oldest of three. My youngest brother, 11 years younger than me, is a huge Pink Floyd fan. Loves all 70s rock, probably more than I do. He's stuck with that as being something that he loves. My middle brother is not a Pink Floyd fan. I mean, he's anti-Pink Floyd fan, but he likes sort of more poppy and maybe African music and more sort of upbeat and stoner rock, not to be dismissive or to be what's the word, sort of to reduce it to that, but is not his cup of tea per se. But I thought it would be a good three brothers thing, and so we went to the movie together. So that was a nice brothers thing to experience. So here we were, opening night. I think it was sold out. It was packed here in Toronto. Went in the front door with through a massive haze of pot smoking outside the Scotiabank Theater, and went up to the IMAX cinema, got our seats. We were in row D, which meant a deep lean back, and the massive IMAX screen sort of up, right up there. So it was. Um, we'll get into this because you'll understand what I'm saying about the experience and the way it was shot of seeing this so close, so tall. So that was my experience. What was yours in terms of who'd you go with?
So after we had spoken about the seeing the film, I ended up buying tickets for my son John and myself to go. So John's 31, very wide music taste, a lot of underground, loves a lot of techno, psych, all sorts of different things, some older stuff. So it was an interesting experience as well seeing it here. I mean, we didn't have a massive cloud of pot smoke to walk through, although it was the usual fragrance that you smell around in the city here. And the theater, I would say, was pretty much sold out except for the first two or three rows. So we were in row E, which brought us back a bit, and strangely enough, for the same seats that we had for when we had seen the Zeppelin movie. So we had that kind of, comparative, if you will. And so yeah, it was interesting doing it with him. I think had his own opinions about it and all that, but it was fun.
Um, Tell me a little bit, just for people who are watching. So we decided, Rick and I, to not discuss at all after seeing the movie. So this is our first kind of connect
Mhm.
with no advance warning about what each of us thought about the film. So tell me, I guess initially, I'm going to put the first volley over to you. Initially, what was your thought about the film? What was your experience like for you overall?
Well, interesting, I guess, from my perspective. I guess the biggest thing was probably that I should mention that I'd seen it originally at a midnight movie screening, actually, I think in 1972, in the Hamilton area, Ontario, in Canada. And at that time, I was joking about it with my son. I remember clearly, it was tough enough to see the screen, let alone tough enough to kind of see it through the massive clay cloud pot smoke in the theater at that point. That being said, um, and that version I think that I had seen then was about an hour. So it was interesting watching this again. Uh, Very much, in my view, very interesting kind of snapshot of time of things that were the way they were then, just right from, uh, like many films from that period. Uh, but an interesting combination of things for it to be a concert film, so to speak, right? I think that the whole notion of, how experimental the band was and the period that they were caught in, so to speak. In other words, the period that this film captures them in my view, is probably the best period for the band. I really always enjoyed the more experimental kind of psychedelic stuff, anyways. And so I think there was probably that, I guess. Um, if you want me to keep going here, but I guess that experimental nature really came through in the film. I think in the performances, that I really, really enjoyed, and I'd love to get into that with you a bit because I think that really says a lot about the band. I had also seen the band in '72 as well in Toronto when they played Maple Leaf Gardens, and at that point they were touring for the Metal album. So this material I was very familiar with uh, from Mama Gamma and albums like that. And I guess so that experimentation thing I think was big. I guess the other thing was just the time period and the simplicity of all the equipment. And this is probably the musician side of me coming out. Watching them play this stuff, it was interesting seeing them with how limited, a lot of the stuff they were using was, certainly while filming this, outside of the barrage of equipment that they used, to at the actual Pompeii, right? I think the scenery and stuff was great. To me, it's a concert film under the guise of an art house type film, with the and the trippy kind of things that were happening in, sort of psychedelic tinged films from that period, late '60s to the '70s. Probably a little more in common with, Zabriskie Point and things like that. Um, but yeah, I guess, and I thought it did a good job of showcasing each member. Yeah, which I think they've always been a bit of a, I think outside real fans, I think they're not one of those bands where the personalities have necessarily always popped through. So it's interesting watching, there was a fairly equal representation of the band. I guess the other thing just musically was the percussive nature of the material at that point. Really, I was reminded of that seeing it again. Um, the Steven Wilson production, I think, is clean, really works. And, when they play, for example, One of These Days, that bass line just pops, just pops, with the IMAX sound system. But it's it's a fun film, I think, for fans, certainly. The crowd that was there when we saw it, the majority were probably, mid 40s up. A number of people, I guess, younger, but sort of mid 40s up, if you will. And some commentary at different points when David Gilmour's face comes up, on the screen, and it's like 20 feet high, and his eyes are a bit glazed. People started laughing. It was just that kind of thing. But it's an enjoyable film, I guess, from that perspective. I guess lastly, I'll just say the additional footage that's included in this version and is one of the, I think in some of the later versions of them recording Dark Side was very fascinating. I always love watching that kind of studio interplay. It's the same reason I really enjoyed the Peter Jackson Beatles stuff. All the stuff that happens in the background, the how they put the cake together, so to speak. I always find fascinating just the the interplay and the what happens. So, how
That's
about
cool.
yourself?
Yeah. So again, I think I mentioned earlier that I had never seen the film. Maybe I didn't mention that. I had never seen the film. Um, I really have always liked metal. Um, and of course Dark Side of the Moon, but that sort of that period of time. Um, the sound, I said the same thing about the Zeppelin, like the sound, the separation, the clarity, while maintaining the rich bottom end of it was really great. Like it was just, honest to God, I could almost just say I want to have like a listening party of that show, and I don't even need the visuals. It was so good. Um, the what else? So one of the things I struggled with a little bit was the era of filmmaking in terms of like really slow tracking shots, like a minute and a half on a mosaic face. I had a hard time kind of seeing like why it needed to be that long, and it was kind of like I
Right.
found that somewhat distracting. And I apologize for those who are huge fans because I'm not putting it down. It was just like literally, I'm getting to be an older guy who sits there and watches like lava bubbling up in the same shot over and over of the lava, and I'm just or the bubbling mud or whatever. And I'm kind of going, yeah, yeah, I get it. I get it. Okay. And one of the things that was interesting to me that I quite liked was you mentioned about the egalitarian presentation of the band members. And I think that's probably true, but I would almost argue that Nick Mason gets front and center, and maybe that's because of the rhythmic nature.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. I think that so a couple of things, I guess. One is that I think Nick Mason is featured a lot. And again, to me, that was part of it is the rhythmic nature of so many of these tracks, right? Whether it's Saucer Full of Secrets or One of These Days, or there's just a lot happening there with this drum kit. I noticed he'd had, it looks like there was gaffing tape used to hold down rocks on each of the skins on the drums,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
it was like, that's how close certainly on IMAX. Um, Picture representation was, right? And so I think that for sure he's featured a lot. The one thing I think to me, when I said earlier, to me it's a snapshot of a period in time. It's definitely a snapshot of a period in time because, to your point, I mean, cinematically, I haven't been to Pompeii. It looks amazing, and the way it's shot there in the amphitheater and that it's incredible, just visually. But that being said, to your point, it made me wonder, gee, is there like footage missing that they were, putting in there, where people kind of tripping out a little bit, and it's like, yeah, let's focus on that 2,000-year-old stone face for a minute, right? So I kind of agree with that stuff. I mean, it is, I don't want to use the term dated because I just think it is what it is, right? You'll never see that again. You'll never see that period again. It's a great way to kind of just a slice of what was happening, certainly artistically, I think at that point. But I think cinematically, yeah, for an hour and a half, it's for real fans only, I would argue. And I mean, interestingly, right? You mentioned the Zeppelin because to me, as a comparative, the Zeppelin, in a way, almost is a great way for a new audience to get into the band in a way, right? And
Yes.
without celebrating the old, but pulling new people in. Whereas this was sort of an existing thing, and I think it's far superior from what I can remember seeing it as. But it is what it is. The bubbling lava, and walking up Mount Vesuvius or wherever it was they were. I mean, it's kind of fun, and you know, like I said, we were joking about the David jump. My son and I were even joking about the Gilmore stuff because he does look kind of googly eyed. But with all due respect, he's a great he's a great musician and all the rest of that. I guess one other thing I kind of was thinking too when I watched it was it just reminded me a lot more about where they kind of sit in sort of the kind of pantheon of music, right, with respect to like krautrock and some of that stuff. Like it just watching them perform all that stuff live again with that incarnation of the band and that period just reminded me of that as well.
Yeah, and I was thinking what we both have been saying about the more dated quality of it, and I think it really says a lot about how one views what you're watching. So, I guess I was looking at it through more modern eyes and sort of feeling that the edits were slow and it seemed a bit dated, but one could also argue, as I think you kind of have, which is that it is of a time. It's quite unique, and you can kind of enjoy it for what it is if one is able to do that, you know.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to kind of do a bit of a comparison with respect to, Floyd at Pompeii against other movies from that period. And I think when it comes to that kind of music, I'm not sure what else may have been out at that point. It's obvious to compare it to, the Monterey Pop and Woodstock and lots of other specific things or other films as well. But it's an interesting, that sort of balance between the concert thing and then the aesthetic of where they were and all that. It's, you could either think it works, I guess, or it doesn't. But I agree with you. It is a, it's definitely a snapshot period of time, right?
Hmm.
I was watching it and I'm thinking, I still want a shirt like that one Nick Mason wears. It's like, so it is old, yeah, but fun nonetheless. I think if you're a fan, I think the music itself is the versions they've done were good as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that, we've now got the Becoming Led Zeppelin, Live at Pompeii, the Pink Floyd one. I wonder what other ones might be coming. I mean, I wonder whether, I mean, the Led Zeppelin one was a unique release, but whether they'll be doing more of these sort of 4K, upscale of old rock films. I think of things like, well, again, Zeppelin song remains the same, or maybe The Kids Are All Right, the Who documentary, or
Yeah, I mean, I think the Kids Are All Right would be a great one to adapt, I think, for 4K. And I think, it's probably so many of these are, in my opinion, due to be remastered, so the picture quality is much better. Um, and with whatever additional footage and all that. I think the other band that I could definitely see getting on this, I'm a little surprised they haven't been on it already. Maybe they already are the Rolling Stones
yeah.
because they have a number of films, outside of Gimme Shelter, for example, the Ladies and Gentlemen, the Rolling Stones, which would be a great film to see remastered and then put on screen again, or I think there was another one.
Seasucker Blues.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know if that'll ever make it there, but
Maybe not.
I have a bootleg copy of that. But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a unique opportunity, definitely an interesting market segment, so to speak, to be able to appeal to music fans. I think that want to be able to see these things. I think the Zeppelin movie showed there's a lot of opportunity to do it. I mean, if I was you know responsible for or in the band, I'd be looking at this stuff if I thought there was an opportunity to do it. This is a great opportunity to get your music out there again and revitalize catalog sales or whatever. But
Mhm.
I think the music itself, I think it's. I always love it with Mazzy always says, right? It's about the music, stupid. It's ultimately about the music, right? And I
Mhm.
think in this case, some visual representation of the show and what they did and the band and all that, it's interesting. But the music, the performances are really good. That's the other thing I found was just it was fun watching it. But it's a snapshot of a period, and I'm not a huge fan of the Wall and all that other stuff. So
Me either.
I'm sure other people are big fans, but which is
Yeah,
great.
the Abbey Road stuff was cool. Like I liked they have the two big ones that focuses were Richard Wright on us and them doing the piano bit. That was really lovely.
Yeah, well, I think I agree. I think that I was really, and I was reminded watching it again after seeing it years ago that, he did get some additional screen time, especially with the Abbey Road stuff. Nick Mason as well. I think, Gilmore and Roger Waters certainly get a lot of, done a lot of solo work. And I mean, the Nick Mason latest Saucerful of Secrets live thing. And, Richard Wright, I think, was a fairly limited couple of releases from what I can recall on solo records. But it was nice to see them each get, some time there in the sun, so to speak,
Mhm.
and show their talents. I mean, he was clearly a very talented guy.
Did you have you heard the Luck and Strange album, David Gilmour's most recent one?
I have. I haven't played it a ton, but I have played it. I have to confess I am a fan of his, so to speak. I lost track with some of his
Me too.
more recent releases. But I did pick up the latest one, and I like it a lot. Actually, I think
Mhm.
it's interesting him getting his family involved and all the rest of that, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I
Also,
think he's a
there's
good guy.
There's a long track, I forget, but it's basically a barn jam. They have a video of it as well, and Richard Wright was alive for that. And so it's his keyboards on that kind of live barn jam that's on that
Oh,
record. And
yeah.
yeah, he was still a great, good, I mean, sorry, great keyboard player right to the end.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very interesting watching like we got out of the theater. This is geek talk here, but I was out of the theater and I said to John, I go, we were commenting, I was commenting about the amount of equipment that they had when they filmed this thing, and I read about it a couple days ago that the it was basically all the stuff that they would bring when they toured. So these banks of amplifiers, and they had at one point for those people who not musicians or whatever, but there are. I noticed there were three Leslie cabinets. So if you're people who play keyboards probably know this stuff, or the Hammond organ typically gets pumped through one of these Leslie cabinets, but they had like three of them. I'd never ever
Is
seen
that
that
the one with
before.
the that spins around and it,
Exactly,
yeah.
spinning cones, and yeah, so I thought that was pretty wild. Like just the amount of equipment, and thought that was kind of fun.
So, representing sort of the younger generation, as it were, so your son John, what were his comments? What in particular did he like or not be such a fan of?
I think what he did enjoy, he liked the performances. I think he had some other issues. I think with not so much issues. I think he kind of noted it as you did as well, and we've discussed about it is a bit older, right? And I think he likes stuff from that period. I think he's a huge film guy as well. So for him, I think he liked a lot of the, those dollying shots, those slow dollying shots they did, and tracking shot.
Mhm.
But then some of those other things where there was like almost like a slideshow happening was a bit weird, right? So, and I think he probably had some issues, I think, with that from what I recall. But the music, I mean, I wouldn't say he's a huge Floyd fan. He owns a copy of Dark Side, but I don't think really plays it. And he does like the earlier stuff. He does, I know he likes Amagama a fair bit, for example, and
Mhm.
he enjoys metal a lot. And, so we had some discussion about that, and some of the earlier records as well.
Cool. Well, why don't we wrap up there unless you've got any closing comments? I wanted to get this out there so that people could get kind of at least a
Yeah,
couple perspectives.
I just, yeah, I thought it was fun. I think it's definitely worth a view. Highly encourage people, if you're a fan, go see it in IMAX. I think it's a fantastic experience seeing it on a screen. It's like 2 stories high, and or whatever it is. And then, as you mentioned, Brian, that sound system,
Mhm.
it's just incredible when that music kicks in. When they get loud, it gets loud, and you feel it, and it's a great way to just experience it, and fun way to see it. It'll be interesting to see if there's anything additional that ever comes on Blu-ray or in 4K or whatever at some point. So
You never know with Steven Wilson, there could be some outtakes and special
that's
stuff
right.
features, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly
Well,
right.
thanks very much for joining me, and thanks for watching, everyone. And we'll keep coming back to the rock movies as new opportunities present themselves. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for having me on, Brian. Great to see you.
You too. Bye.
Take care.
Cheers.